In just 47 seconds, one of Hollywood's most respected actors would unleash a verbal assault so brutal that it would leave veteran broadcaster George Stephanopoulos visibly shaken and scrambling for damage control. What started as promotional banter for Hardy's latest film quickly devolved into a character assassination that exposed the dark underbelly of morning television politics and left producers frantically cutting to commercial break. The British actor's explosive takedown of Stephanopoulos would become the most talked-about moment in Good Morning America history, ending with security being called and Hardy storming off set in a blaze of fury. The tension was palpable from the moment Tom Hardy stepped onto the GMA set. Fresh off promoting his latest gritty crime thriller, the notoriously private actor had reluctantly agreed to the morning show appearance at the insistence of his publicist. But what should have been a straightforward promotional segment quickly turned into something far more sinister when Stephanopoulos decided to ambush his guest with questions that had nothing to do with the film. Tom, before we talk about your new movie, I want to address something that's been making headlines. Stephanopoulos began with that trademark smirk that guests had come to dread. His tone carried the unmistakable smugness of someone who believed he held all the cards. There are reports circulating about some controversial comments you allegedly made at a private industry event last month regarding the current political climate in Hollywood. Hardy's jaw visibly tightened, his piercing blue eyes narrowing as he fixed his gaze on the host. The camera caught the exact moment when the actor's demeanor shifted from professional courtesy to barely contained irritation. "I'm sorry. What comments are you referring to exactly, George?" Hardy's voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it that anyone who knew the actor would recognize as a warning sign. Stephanopoulos leaned forward, clearly relishing the moment. "Well, according to several sources who were present, you made some rather inflammatory remarks about the media's role in shaping public opinion, particularly regarding how certain news outlets manipulate celebrity interviews for their own political agenda." The host's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of someone who believed he'd just delivered a knockout blow. The studio fell silent, except for the low hum of cameras rolling. Hardy sat back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Not the friendly smile of a guest promoting his work, but something far more dangerous. "Inflammatory remarks," he repeated slowly, tasting each word. "That's interesting coming from you, George. Tell me, are these the same several sources who conveniently remain anonymous? The same sources your network seems to rely on whenever you need to manufacture controversy where none exists?" Stephanopoulos' confident expression flickered for just a moment, but he pressed on. "I'm simply asking you to clarify your position. Our viewers deserve to know where you stand on these important issues." His voice took on that sanctimonious tone that had made him countless enemies throughout his career in journalism. "Your viewers," Hardy repeated, his British accent becoming more pronounced as his anger simmered just beneath the surface. "Right. Because this is really about serving your viewers, isn't it? It has nothing to do with trying to create a viral moment or generate clicks for your struggling morning show ratings." The actor's words cut through the studio air like a blade, each syllable delivered with surgical precision. The host's face began to redden slightly, but he maintained his professional composure. "Tom, I think you're being a bit unfair. We're simply doing our job as journalists to ask the hard questions." Stephanopoulos' voice carried a hint of desperation now, as if he was beginning to realize he'd bitten off more than he could chew. Hardy let out a short, bitter laugh that sent chills through everyone watching. "Journalists? Is that what you call yourselves now?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerously low register. "Let me ask you something, George. When was the last time you actually practiced journalism, instead of whatever this tabloid ambush bullshit is supposed to be?" The profanity hit like a thunderbolt through the normally sanitized morning show environment. Producers in the control room scrambled to decide whether to cut away, while Stephanopoulos' face went from red to pale in a matter of seconds. But Hardy wasn't finished. He was just getting started, and everyone in that studio could sense that something explosive was about to unfold. The silence that followed Hardy's challenge hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Stephanopoulos shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly trying to regain control of what had already become a runaway train. "Tom, I think we need to keep this professional," he said, his voice wavering slightly as he attempted to project authority he no longer possessed. Hardy's laugh was cold and sharp, cutting through the host's feeble attempt at damage control. Professional? You want to talk about professional? The actor's eyes blazed with an intensity that made several crew members take an involuntary step backward. You ambush me on live television with some fabricated controversy, and now you want to lecture me about professionalism? That's rich, George. That's really fucking rich. The second expletive sent shockwaves through the control room. This time, the show's executive producer was frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but something about the raw electricity of the moment kept everyone frozen in place. They were witnessing television history in the making, and nobody wanted to be the one to pull the plug. Stephanopoulos' hands trembled slightly as he gripped his interview cards, the carefully scripted questions now useless in the face of Hardy's volcanic eruption. I'm not sure what you're implying, but I can assure our viewers that every question we ask is thoroughly researched and verified through multiple sources, he stammered, his usual confidence completely evaporated. Hardy leaned back and crossed his arms, his posture radiating contempt. Multiple sources, he repeated mockingly. Let me guess. The same multiple sources who told you I was some kind of political extremist. The same sources who conveniently forgot to mention that I've never attended any private industry event in the past 6 months. His voice rose with each word, building to a crescendo that made the studio feel smaller and more suffocating. The color drained completely from Stephanopoulos' face as the implications of Hardy's words sank in. The carefully constructed narrative he'd built his ambush around was crumbling before his eyes, and worse yet, it was happening in front of millions of viewers. Well, our research team is very thorough, and while specific details might sometimes be what, George? Hardy interrupted, his voice now dangerously quiet. Might sometimes be completely made up? Might sometimes be total bullshit designed to create controversy where none exists? The actor stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the stunned silence of the studio. Stephanopoulos instinctively recoiled, pressing himself back into his chair as Hardy towered over him. The height difference was striking. Hardy's imposing physical presence, making the veteran broadcaster look small and pathetic by comparison. You know what your problem is, George? You've been playing this game for so long that you've forgotten the difference between news and entertainment. You've become so addicted to manufactured drama that you're willing to destroy people's reputations just to get your ratings bump. The host tried to regain some semblance of control, his voice cracking as he spoke. Tom, I think you're overreacting. This is simply standard journalistic practice. Standard journalistic practice? Hardy's voice exploded through the studio like a thunderclap. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Standard practice is fact-checking your stories before you put them on air. Standard practice is giving your guests basic respect, instead of setting them up for public execution. What you've done here isn't journalism. It's character assassination disguised as morning television. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of Stephanopoulos' humiliation. Sweat beads had formed on the host's forehead, and his usually perfect hair was beginning to show signs of distress. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd walked into a lion's cage armed with nothing but his own arrogance. We can discuss this off-air if you prefer, Stephanopoulos offered weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. Hardy's response was swift and merciless. Oh no, George. You wanted to have this conversation on live television, so we're going to finish it on live television. You don't get to drag my name through the mud in front of your audience and then suddenly decide you want privacy when things get uncomfortable for you. The studio was completely silent except for the low hum of the cameras and the barely audible breathing of the terrified crew members. Everyone could feel the tension building towards something catastrophic, something that would change the trajectory of the morning show forever. Hardy's eyes burned with righteous fury as he prepared to deliver what would surely be the killing blow to Stephanopoulos' already crumbling credibility. You want to know what really happened at that so-called private industry event, George? Hardy's voice was now a weapon, each word carefully aimed and devastatingly effective. There was no event. There were no controversial comments. There were no multiple sources. You and your research team fabricated the entire fucking story because you needed something juicy to boost your pathetic ratings. The actor's British accent had become razor-sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. Stephanopoulos' mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. The veteran broadcaster, who had made a career out of cornering politicians and celebrities alike, was now completely defenseless against Hardy's relentless assault. His carefully constructed persona was crumbling in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Hardy wasn't done. He leaned down, bringing his face closer to Stephanopoulos's, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that the microphones barely picked up. Do you have any idea what it's like to have your publicist call you at 6 a.m. to tell you that some hack journalist is spreading lies about you on national television? Do you understand the damage that kind of bullshit can do to someone's career, their family, their life? The host's hands were visibly shaking now, and beads of sweat were rolling down his forehead. Tom, if there was some kind of miscommunication. Miscommunication? Hardy straightened up, his voice exploding with renewed fury. You call fabricating sources and manufacturing controversy a miscommunication? Jesus Christ, George, even for you that's pathetic. You've sunk so low that you're willing to destroy innocent people just to create your little moments of manufactured drama. The control room was in complete chaos. Producers were shouting conflicting orders, some demanding they cut to commercial, while others insisted they keep rolling. The show's director had gone pale, knowing that whatever happened next would define his career. This wasn't just television anymore. This was a public execution, and George Stephanopoulos was the one on the chopping block. Stephanopoulos made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Perhaps we should take a break and discuss this rationally. Rationally? Hardy's laugh was bitter and cold. You want to be rational now? After you've spent the last 15 minutes trying to assassinate my character on live television? The actor began pacing behind his chair like a caged predator, his energy radiating danger. Let me tell you what's rational, George. What's rational is calling out predatory journalists who think they can destroy people's lives for entertainment value. The host's voice was barely a whisper now. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. I never intended to... You never intended to what? Get caught? Hardy stopped pacing and fixed Stephanopoulos with a stare that could have melted steel. You never intended to have someone actually fight back, instead of just sitting there and taking your ambush like all your other victims do? The cameras captured every moment of Stephanopoulos' complete breakdown. His carefully styled hair was disheveled. His face was flushed with embarrassment and fear, and his hands continued to shake as he gripped his useless interview cards. This was no longer the confident broadcaster who had started the interview. This was a broken man who had finally met his match. Hardy picked up his microphone pack and began unhooking it from his shirt. You know what the really sad part is, George? You used to be a real journalist. You used to ask important questions about important issues. But somewhere along the way, you decided that truth was less important than ratings, that integrity was less valuable than viral moments. He tossed the microphone pack onto the coffee table between them, with a loud thud that seemed to echo through the stunned studio. I'm done here, Hardy announced, his voice carrying the finality of a judge's gavel. I came here to talk about my film, to give your viewers some entertainment and insight. Instead, I walked into an ambush orchestrated by a has-been broadcaster who's so desperate for relevance that he's willing to sacrifice his last shred of credibility. Stephanopoulos made one final pathetic attempt to stop the disaster. Tom, please, if we could just... No. Hardy's single word cut through the air like a gunshot. We're done. You're done. This whole charade is done. The actor turned toward the cameras, addressing the audience directly. To anyone watching this, I want you to remember what you've just seen. This is what passes for journalism on morning television. This is how your trusted news sources operate when they think they can get away with it. Hardy began walking toward the exit, his heavy footsteps the only sound in the deathly quiet studio. But he stopped just before reaching the edge of the set and turned back one final time. Oh, and George, next time you want to ambush someone on live television, maybe make sure your facts are straight first. It might save you from another humiliation like this one. With that final verbal bullet, Hardy disappeared from view, leaving behind a shell-shocked Stephanopoulos and a studio full of witnesses to one of the most devastating takedowns in television history. The host sat motionless in his chair, staring blankly ahead as the weight of his professional destruction settled over him like a funeral shroud. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing Stephanopoulos' complete defeat before finally, mercifully, cutting to commercial. But the damage was already done. In the span of one disastrous interview, George Stephanopoulos had gone from respected broadcaster to cautionary tale. And Tom Hardy had proven that sometimes, fighting back against media manipulation was the only rational response to an irrational attack.